My name is Carter Hayes. I'm 44 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed loyalty was the highest currency a man could offer. For 20 years, I worked alongside my best friend, Evan Brooks, building the Orion Collection, a group of boutique luxury hotels across the Midwest. We started with a single struggling property in downtown Kansas City. The carpets were stained. The pipes rattled. The guest list consisted mostly of salesmen and the occasional desperate traveler. We poured everything into that first hotel. Sweat, money, late nights laying tile ourselves when we couldn't afford contractors. When the city inspectors came by, they knew us by name. When guests complained, it was me who carried their luggage upstairs, and Evan who comped their drinks at the bar. We lived on takeout Chinese. Skipped paychecks more a month than I can count, and still found reasons to believe. Slowly, it paid off. 5 years later, we opened our second location in St. Louis, then one in Minneapolis, then Chicago. By the time I was 40, we had 7 properties, over 800 employees, and an emerging reputation as a boutique alternative to the soulless corporate chains. Evan and I split the responsibilities naturally. He handled investors, public relations, and marketing. The charming face of Orion. I ran the operations, hiring, training, building vendor relationships, overseeing renovations, managing crises. Our division of labor wasn't formalized. It was built on something stronger, trust. Or so I thought. The first cracks appeared about a year ago. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Expansion had stretched us thin. Evan spent more time flying to New York and L.A. than he did at any of our properties. When he was around, he started throwing out phrases like scalability and tech disruption, parroting consultants who saw hospitality not as an art, but as a metrics game. He'd talk about streamlining staff, automating guest services, minimizing unnecessary overhead, which usually meant firing the people who built the soul of our hotels. I pushed back, politely at first, then more firmly. I thought we were having a healthy debate. I thought he respected my experience, my instincts. I didn't realize he was maneuvering me into a corner. The betrayal came on a Wednesday. Evan called an executive meeting at our flagship property in Chicago. He looked sharp, new tailored suit, tan from some investor retreat in the Bahamas. There were faces there I didn't recognize. A couple consultants, a new CFO we hadn't hired together. Evan stood at the head of the conference table, smiling that easy, affable smile he perfected over the years. Effective immediately, he announced. Carter will be stepping down as COO. He's decided to pursue other opportunities. I stared at him across the polished oak table, my mouth dry. There had been no discussion, no warning, no offer transition, just a glossy execution. I opened my mouth to object, but 2 things stopped me. First, the look on Evan's face. Not regret, not sadness, triumph. Second, the legal folder in front of me, quietly placed there by the new HR director. Inside was a severance agreement. Generous, on the surface, a year's salary, continuation of health benefits, a glowing letter of recommendation. In exchange for a non-compete clause that would effectively end my career in luxury hospitality for the next 2 years. The walls of the room closed in. I realized with cold clarity that Evan had been planning this for months, quietly moving legal structures, reshuffling board members, diluting my voting power. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was an inconvenient obstacle, and now he was removing me. I didn't sign the papers that day. I didn't argue, either. I simply stood, buttoned my jacket, nodded once, and walked out of the building I had built with my own hands. My phone buzzed as I reached the sidewalk. First 1 message, then 3, then dozens. Staff members, suppliers, old friends from the early days. Word traveled fast, but I didn't answer. Not that night, not for a long time. The first few weeks after the firing were a fog. I stayed holed up in my apartment downtown, blinds drawn, ignoring calls. Pride, rage, and grief warred inside me. How do you mourn something you built, something that defined you for half your life? Some nights, I woke gasping from dreams where I was still checking in guests at the front desk, still managing linen shortages, still tasting new cocktails for the rooftop bar. Other nights, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing Evan's voice in my head. Scalability, disruption, efficiency. The words felt like knives now. It was my younger sister, Marcy, who finally forced me out of my self-imposed exile. One rainy Friday afternoon, she showed up unannounced with a pizza, a six-pack, and a look that brooked no argument. "You need to stop sitting here dying of pride," she said bluntly, pushing the pizza box into my hands. "You built those hotels. You can build something else." I signed a non-compete. I muttered, "You signed a piece of paper written by lawyers who don't know the first thing about who you are." She snapped back. And just like that, a seed was planted. By the end of that weekend, I had a plan. Not revenge. Not sabotage. Something better. Reinvention.
I spent the next month laying the foundation. I wasn't reckless. I studied the non-compete agreement word by word, line by line. Evan's lawyers had written it broad and sweeping, but not airtight. They restricted me from working for direct competitors within a 150-mile radius of any Orion property. But they couldn't stop me from working outside that radius. And they couldn't prevent me from building something completely new, something that didn't mimic Orion's model at all. They thought they had trapped me. They forgot who taught them how to build. I packed a duffel bag with essentials, dropped my apartment keys off with my landlord, and hit the road. 3 hours south, across the state line, I found myself in a sleepy town called Spring Hollow, population 17,000, one stoplight downtown, and a main street that hadn't changed since 1954. It was perfect. Not for a new Orion. For something they could never replicate. I found an abandoned 2-story brick building near the train depot. Boarded up windows. A leaky roof. A sagging, "For sale," sign out front. I bought it for half the price of a new SUV. For 3 months, I lived like a ghost. Woke up at dawn. Repaired plumbing with my own hands. Ripped up moldy carpet and sanded hardwood floors until my fingers bled. Painted walls by flashlight. Cooked dinner on a hot plate in the back office. There was no budget for contractors. No time for marketing consultants or branding agencies. Just me, sweat, and stubbornness. Exactly the way it had been when we opened the first Orion. I called it the Foundry. Not a hotel in the traditional sense. A hybrid part boutique inn, part co-working space, part community hub. 10 rooms upstairs, lovingly restored with clawfoot tubs, vintage lighting, and hand-stitched quilts. Downstairs, a coffee shop during the day, a whiskey bar at night. Meeting rooms that could be rented by local artists, musicians, and entrepreneurs. No digital disruption. No fancy apps. Just old-school hospitality done right. Real people, real connection, real community. I didn't advertise. I let word spread the way it used to, one conversation at a time. The first guests were travelers who stumbled upon us looking for something different than a chain motel. Then came weekenders from the city, tired of soulless Airbnbs and overpriced resorts. Then came the journalists. A blogger from Chicago who wrote about hidden gems. A freelance travel writer who fell in love with the bar's bourbon flights and stayed to write an article titled, "The Best Hotel You've Never Heard of." Within 6 months, we were fully booked 3 months in advance. Not because we were trendy. Because we were real. Meanwhile, I heard things through the grapevine about Orion. Evan had expanded too fast. Opened 3 new properties with heavy debt loads. Staff turnover was skyrocketing. Guest satisfaction ratings plummeted. Investors were growing restless. Apparently, disruption wasn't paying the bills. Apparently, spreadsheets and dashboards couldn't replace heart. One evening, as I was polishing glasses behind the bar, I saw a familiar figure walk through the door. Evan. He looked smaller somehow. Tired. Deflated. He spotted me behind the counter and hesitated. I waited. Finally, he walked over, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "This place is impressive," he said, glancing around. "Thanks," I replied evenly, polishing another glass. He shifted awkwardly. "I thought you had a non-compete." I smiled, not unkindly. "I do. 150 miles from any Orion property. This is 154. He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. I wanted to say, maybe we made a mistake," he said, voice low. "You mean you made a mistake?" I corrected gently. He swallowed hard, nodding. "Things aren't going as planned," he admitted. "I heard," I said. A long pause. Maybe there's a way we could work together again," he offered. I set down the glass carefully. "No," I said simply. "I don't rebuild bridges that were burned deliberately." His face twisted, as if he had something more to say, an apology, an excuse, but in the end, he just nodded and walked out into the night. I watched him go without anger. Some debts aren't worth collecting. The foundry grew. Organically. Honestly. We added a second building down the street, a bakery and bookshop. Then a third, an artist's loft space. We didn't scale recklessly. We didn't seek venture capital. We built carefully, the way we always should have. And the town of Spring Hollow embraced us, not just as a business, but as a heartbeat. 1 year after Evan walked into my bar, Orion Holdings filed for bankruptcy protection. Overexpansion. Unsustainable debt. Declining guest satisfaction. Investor lawsuits. They cited market conditions and unforeseen challenges in their public statements. But I knew better. They forgot the most important rule of hospitality. You don't just serve guests. You serve people. And people know when you stop caring. It's funny, looking back. For a long time, I thought Evan stole everything from me. My career. My reputation. My future. But standing here today, looking out over a packed house at the Foundry's anniversary celebration, I realize he only took the things that didn't matter. The title. The office. The illusion. The real things, the grit, the soul, the relationships I'd built, those were mine all along. And they couldn't be taken. I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. Stronger. Better. Freer. Not because I chased revenge, but because I remembered what mattered. Real work. Real people. Real trust. Sometimes I still drive past the ruins of what used to be Orion's flagship property. It's boarded up now, a for sale sign rotting in the overgrown weeds. A reminder. Betrayal can break you. Or it can build you into something even your enemies couldn't have imagined. The choice is yours. It always was.